Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast. Join your host, Nicole Cox, as she dives into the real stories, tips, secrets, and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside the trade world. Nick is here to help you break free from the grind, reduce money stress, and build a trade business that truly works for you. So grab a brew, put your phone on silent, and get ready to be inspired.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Tradies in Business podcast. I have another special guest with me today. I'm joined by an author. I was going to say I think it's one of the first authors we've had, and then I've thought back through the very quick scan that you do, and we've had quite a few, but I haven't had one for a while. And today we're talking all about men, which I reckon is just probably about 80% of our listenership. So sit down, listen in. I think you're really going to enjoy our time today with John Broadbent. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Nick. It's an absolute privilege.
John, you and I had a fantastic chat before I pressed record, which I love to do. And I should just, for anyone watching, here's John's book, Men Unplugged, Secret Men's Business. I just love the title. I've had a really quick scan of the book and I actually really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the chat that we had before I pressed record today. There's so much to talk about with our fellas. And whilst we talk a lot about men here and where they're at, I don't have a lot of personal insight to men, being a lady. I might look after some men in my life. I might have some amazing men in my life, but being a lady means I don't know as much as you do. So, John, you haven't always been an author, and as you shared with me, there's quite a journey to get you to this point where you first wrote your book in 2014. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Originally born in the UK. My parents were 10-pound poms. I got here for nothing. I'm a freeloader. We came out by boat, but rather than going around Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, for some reason our boat went through Panama Canal, which I still remember. It was an incredible experience.
Wow.
And then Tahiti, Auckland, Melbourne, Sydney.
Wow, what a journey.
Incredible journey. And I came through Sydney Heads as the Opera House was being built and on my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And my dad said that Australia was my too big to wrap birthday present. And I was, because I'll never look back from coming out here from Yorkshire. I'm very happy that I'm here and this is very much my home.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. Very different to home. Well, the original home.
Yeah, I finished my high school here, or started my high school here, because I had to repeat a year of primary because of age difference. That got me into a selective high school, almost by stealth, which then got me into eventually the New South Wales Institute of Technology, where I ended up doing a 6-year mechanical engineering cadetship, but I had to start as an apprentice.
It's a fascinating journey, the way, and I don't believe it's done the same way now. I feel like there's a university degree and then you go out for the real world experience.
Such a tragedy, because by the time I came out, I had 42 months. And I was with CSR Limited, building materials company and sugar company back then.
Yeah. And
there was 4 of us for the entire CSR, and we were all offered 5-6 jobs.
Wow.
And I've had a phenomenal career. I'm very, very grateful for my fortune. Good fortune.
Yeah. Yeah. Good choice by your parents to come and join us over here in Oz. So, okay, you've finished your cadetship, you've gone out, you're working in the real world. Tell us a bit more.
Well, I sort of moved up the ranks reasonably quickly, and I ended up with quite a young operational team in a factory. And I discovered quite quickly that I was very naive. My lack of self-worth and self-esteem meant that I would make poor decisions to be liked rather than learn how to manage people. So I grew up really quickly.
You did.
We were talking before we came on that in 1987 I went out on my own because I got into the automation space. So even though I was a mechanical engineer, I loved the whole automation. I ended up setting up an automation company actually for 14 years that we did quite well as a business. But I went into manufacturing myself. I built a manufacturing facility as a clean room for making sterile grade medical syringes.
Oh, wow.
So 2 companies overseas merged. They merged in Australia. It left one site redundant. They were injection molding medical grade syringes. My dad was working in Shoalhaven Hospital as a purchasing manager, said, I can't buy damn syringes because we're not making them anymore.
Yeah.
Business opportunity. I'd left CSR after 11 years, and in those days you could collect your super.
Yes.
So I used my super, bought my house. So here I was at 29, married for 8 years, no kids and debt free.
Wow.
So I was on easy street until I went into business.
That's a common journey, unfortunately.
And then I used my house as security for the loans to buy all the tooling and injection molding stuff, which we started in 88. Had a couple of hiccups in the startup process, but we went okay. And then in 91, in Paul Keating's recession Australia had to have, interest rates at 25% on our overdraft, we became economically non-viable. Came to work one day, the banks locked the door, and then they came after my house and my business partner's house.
Can't even begin to imagine what that would have been like, John.
Well, that was the end. I'd married my high school sweetheart. And we'd been together 17 years, and that was really the end of that relationship because I understood from her point of view she couldn't live in a situation where the roof overhead was going to be taken away. Which I completely understood. So I helped her set up in the inner western suburbs of Sydney. And I remember living in the house for about 10 months with 4 cats and a saucepan. Pretty well, because out of guilt, I gave her everything.
Oh, of course.
Wanted to set up her place.
Yeah.
And then, a long weekend, October 91, I walked out of the house, left the keys to the house on the breakfast bar that I built with my own 2 hands with a suitcase, and got on a plane and went to Malaysia to do a building, engineering contract in Malaysia for an Australian company. And it was a time for me that was, the long, dark, deep time of the soul, as they say. And I was very fortunate that, it significantly affected my mental health. But being overseas and then coming back and then finding an experiential psychotherapist to help me sort myself out, sort of almost bumping into the person accidentally, almost forced me into a deep personal stocktake.
I can't even imagine. So how old would you have been at this age? Not yet 30 or just turned 30? I can't even imagine the enormity of that time, that passage of time, and what that would have brought up for you, and then what you had to process. And sure, the beginning of a great journey that's turned into a wonderful life, but at the time you must have thought it was just all over.
I didn't know how to process it, and that was the problem. I didn't have the skills. I already had low self-worth and self-esteem, and this was just the coffin in the nail. Sorry, the nail in the coffin for me, and it put me into such a tailspin. But through more luck than choice, I end up finding someone who could help me in a mentoring role, just to dig myself out of the firstly the emotional hole. And I think because I didn't have kids, it was probably as tough as it was easier because the children weren't involved. But ultimately, it was a blessing. I look back at that time and I made some different choices how to be in the world. And then at the end of the 90s, my mentor passed away unexpectedly, and I was suddenly left now with losing my closest friend and teacher.
Yes.
Call him that, or mentor. And it was like, what am I going to do now? And I remember thinking I can either just stop my personal development journey and wonder what would happen, or I could honor him and the work that I'd done on myself for that previous 9 years and just pick up the gauntlet and run with it. And I started to read. I've read science fiction, the Lord of the Rings and Dune and that sort of stuff, but I wasn't much of a reader. And then my mentor had a very unusual, eclectic library.
Wow.
And a few weeks after he passed away, I was in his house and I looked at the library and I saw these books and I went, okay. And I just chose a random book and read it, and it was like, this is good shit. Another one. And before I knew it, I was just devouring book after book after book on effectively, the human condition, psychology, Carl Jung, books of that ilk.
Wow.
And what I discovered is what I'd thought the previous 9 years that had been all these disconnected, random occurrences that had got me through out the other side turned to be actually a very well understood and defined process about tapping into our unconscious parts, bringing them into awareness, and then understanding why we are as we are and why we have patterns and beliefs and values and what drives our behavior at unconscious levels. And then I realized I had a real passion for it. So I've been, reading now for 25 years. And that then led me to decide to write the original book in late 2012 through 2013, published 2014.
Yes.
Good reviews at the time, but not as big a reach as I wanted.
Yep.
Not out of ego, just more out of trying to share that journey with other people. The original book was called Man Unplugged, Exploring Inner Man, and it was a little bit esoteric. It was more about my own journey of survival out the other side, a redemption, I guess. And then when I wanted to rewrite it for about 2 years ago, it just started gnawing at me, going, come on, there's more to do, there's more to say.
Wow.
Because the last 10 years I've been through the death of both my parents.
Yeah.
I went through a divorce, got remarried, had another 10 years of experience in the men's realm through gatherings and retreats and men's groups and stuff like that. I've been a parent for an extra 10 years with 2 boys, so I'm one into maturity at 23, so I got to see more of what they needed.
Yes.
And I felt I had, and then I started running, I inherited a rite of passage program in 2019 to help men go through a formal rite of passage into eldership. I was a participant in 2018, went to learn how to run it in 2019. COVID hit and shut us down for 4 years. So I resurrected it last year to great accolades. And I realized then that I now had, much more to offer in the sense of seasons of a man's life. And I added a chapter at the end of the book called Seasons and Eldership. What does that actually mean? So I realize now, looking back to the books now, a sort of cradle to grave legacy story
Love it.
for any man who wants to pick it up and understand where he might be on his timeline.
And can I say it's like really easily written, like it'd be a very consumable read. As I said, I haven't read all of it yet. I've had a skim through, but the way it's written in the bits that have stood out to me, it's there for listeners because not all men like reading. This is a very consumable read. They're little paragraphs. They're very punchy. There's a lot of information in this book, but it doesn't feel laborious like so many self-help type books can feel. It's more it's like a story, John. I feel like there's more of a story within this.
Well,
And that's only the skim.
I had it reviewed, and there was a common, obviously the reviewers didn't know who the other reviewers were, and what I was heartened by was some common perspectives that came through from the reviewers. In particular, several said it's like sitting down with an old mate and talking about the real stuff.
That's the best. Really is.
There's no bullshit, because I'm a very direct writer.
Yep. Yeah.
And the feedback has been they love the fact it's no fluff.
Yeah. I think particularly for men, they don't have time. They don't have the energy. We just need this to be as simple as possible, right?
Yep. Tell me the truth. Let me get on with it.
Yeah. Let me digest it my own time, my own way, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready.
Yeah.
John, you mentioned rite of passage. My first experience of a rite of passage was as a mum. And I had
Yes.
3 boys who went through Christian Brothers schooling, and they had a rite of passage ceremony as they graduated from their middle school through to their senior schooling. And it was really quite profound for each of them. I was quite shocked, having not experienced it before, to understand what a difference it made to their thinking and the way they showed up for themselves. And so I wonder if you can talk through that, because I think in Australia, it's not often that our gents have the opportunity to work through a rite of passage. Can we talk about what it is and what it does?
So in 1904, if I remember correctly, you can check it out. You've got chapter 18 there. A guy called Arnold von Gennep, who was an anthropologist, was noticing that in Indigenous cultures, there was a common way of turning boys into men.
Yeah.
Because the survival of the tribes from our primal past was absolutely a necessity, that we couldn't have adolescent boys in men's bodies contributing to the tribe. They had to mature really quickly. And the common theme was separation, initiation, and preparation to come back. So irrespective of which culture that he looked at, whether it was hanging a vine around your ankles in Vanuatu and jumping off a tower, or scarification of the skin, or circumcision ceremonies, or shaving the head, or losing a tooth, there's lots of different, Maasai, go and kill a lion, as you do. Yeah, it was interesting that he found the common theme. And as a result of that, he understood then the process. And between the first book and the second edition, I read a very extraordinary book by an Indigenous Australian called Tai-Seng-Yunka-Porter, who wrote a book called Sand Talk. And Sand Talk, 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 Stunning book, absolutely incredible book. And in there, he talks about the fact that adolescence is a Western construct.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I like got goosebumps just saying that to you right now.
Yeah.
Because in Indigenous cultures, adolescence lasts months
Wow.
because they know that they are being prepared. So Australian Indigenous cultures, for example, some of them I know about go from 6 to 16 roughly is the journey. So at about the age of 6 or 7, the boys start to know something goes on that's mysterious. They
Yep.
see older boys disappearing around 13, 14, and then they come back and they're warriors and they go, like, well, what is this mysterious process? And of course, the boys who go through that process are under the threat of death.
Mm.
Keep it secret because it has to be. And so they're prepared and prepared and prepared. And then when they go on it, obviously you can't flick a switch and they suddenly go from being a boy to a man overnight. But in that process of rite of passage, what actually happens is the psychological wound that lots of our boys carry in our culture today from our father wound and our mother wound, and I'll go into detail about what they are in the book, they don't get healed.
Yep.
So we go through life as a man carrying a mother wound and a father wound, and then that reflects in the way that we do relationships, for example, the way that we parent.
Yep.
What happens in Indigenous cultures is the scarification of the skin or loss of a tooth or some physical exertion or physical marker of that transition
Mhm.
moves the psychological wound into a palpable wound. And so now we can build a relationship with the scar on my arm that says I'm a man, or the tooth loss that says I'm a man, or some activity, I jumped off a tower with a bungee cord, I'm a man. And so when we then come back after the separation, the initiation and the preparation, when we then come back into the community knows we've been through that process. So they now treat us like an adult.
That's a really key statement you just made, John.
Exactly. So we then fall into naturally in those cultures being the adult. And of course we'll revert and of course we'll make mistakes, but the culture holds us in our adulthood. And that's why adolescence in those cultures is significantly short. And I paraphrase some of Tyson's work in the book, and I quote him a couple of times around the fact that if you want to break in a wild animal, what do? Well, firstly, you isolate them, you put them into a pen, you teach them skills that a horse, for example, would not normally want to know,
Mm.
and you deprive them their liberty. And Tyson says, sounds like high school.
Yeah, it's so true.
And I went, yep. And then he goes back to talk, and I knew about the Prussian army and where our education system actually came from, but he also does an analysis of that, and I've taken a couple of paragraphs out of his book and quoted him in my book, because exactly what he says is what we're seeing as to why it's true, and we wonder why our boys don't actually grow up in the sense of maturing, and then they go into relationship.
Yes.
And then the biggest complaint we hear from women in the couple work that I do with my wife, where we educate couples how to do relationships, the biggest complaint we hear is I've got 3 kids and a husband who's another child.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh,
All the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's not his fault.
No.
It's that's how he was brought up.
We were talking off air, John, about how tough it is to be a man in this time of history. I think is a very complicated space for men to sit in because they're really, well, in my experience, and again, I am speaking as a woman, so I don't have the same experience as the men who are listening. In my experience as a woman working with a lot of men, is they find that when I'm able to have those deeper conversations with them, they're very confused about what a man is and how to show up as a man. They have definitions that have worked for their family over time, but might be very different to what I potentially see as a man. And I just feel as though it's very confusing, very hard for them to understand how to move through their lives as a man. Is that a similar experience for the men that you work with, John? Is that what you have observed and seen over time?
Absolutely. And my 2 sons were the motivation to rewrite the book,
Yeah.
to make it more complete as my legacy to them.
Yeah, that's lovely. Really love that.
Because just as the Me Too movement emerged,
Mm-hmm.
which, thank God it did. It was an appropriate timing for women who'd been so badly mistreated by men in power to be called out and be held accountable for their behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, that was just as men were also starting to find their voice and become more vocal
Yes.
around their own inner world and where they were at. But the sort of the spin-off, I think, of part of the Me Too movement was, you just have to shut up now and
Yeah.
listen to the women talking about their stuff, which is valid also. And just as men were finding their voice, they go, hang on a minute, I've been asked to become more emotionally available and talk about what's going on for me. Now you're telling me to shut up. Like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. And therein sort of like the problem.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of men I feel have been disenfranchised in that inadvertently. Dr. Warren Farrell, who wrote many books, came out to Australia probably about 2013, 2014. But 25 years ago, he predicted that if we didn't pay attention to our boys at that time, the way that he could see things going, and what he would call the feminization of the world,
Yes.
he said we are going to create a generation of unwettable and unemployable young men.
Mm.
And here we are. And now gaming, porn, and marijuana
Yep.
have become sort of the three legs on the stool. And society overall is paying a price because there's now lots of younger men who are, MGTOW, men going their own way.
Yeah.
Want to get into relationships. And so we've created a bit of a mess.
It is a bit of a mess. I couldn't agree more. And I do think we shared off air that I think emotionally and being emotionally available, the generation that is your children and my children, so they're sort of early 20s, are definitely more aware and more open and more able to have those tough conversations or to be vulnerable, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Okay.
However, there are some big issues that we are dealing with within that generation just the same. I don't think what you're saying is incorrect at all. I think it's very accurate. John, how do we fix this? Like, I mean, we can't come up with a solution in the time that we have left today, but if we were to talk broadly about, I guess, connection for men, I think connection for men is one of those key pillars that are missing for men in the way that they need to connect. How can they do that in a way that is supported by their partners, supported by their community, and enables them to take what they need from those connections?
Could you imagine having to explain why women need women?
That's a great question.
It's almost banal in its question because, well, of course, women need women, and yet being asked to write some stuff for various media outlets as part of my launch and my media campaign, I was asked to write, why do men need men? And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, the mere fact that that question has to be asked is an
Yes.
issue within itself. Of
Mhm.
course, they need men. For thousands, millions of years, we would sit in circle, we would talk about key issues. Men's business and women's business have been separate in Indigenous cultures, appropriately so for there's been together, but there's also been separate men's and women's business
Agree.
for reasons. And so we sit around in circle and we talk about problems or share stories or listen to elder wisdom or whatever it was. And where do you think meetings? It came from in organisations, and King Arthur had a right by creating a round table because that was back to the original circle that no one was ahead of it. And so in the modern day, because of pressures in social media and families and responsibilities and, particularly in your audience, tradies doing their thing, there's very little time, or men make very little time. And I know a lot of men who've been pressured that, well, it's the weekend, so now you have to spend time with the family and the kids.
Yes.
And I understand it because mum needs a break and the kids want to see their dad, of course. But men also need to take responsibility, and women can help by allowing their partners, understanding their partners desperately need good, solid male company. And I don't mean to piss up down the pub.
No, I couldn't agree more.
I mean, a bunch of guys getting together, going camping for the weekend. And what needs to happen when men get together is that we need to create a space within our group where we have rules of engagement. That is, no shaming. All emotions are valid, but not at another man. Confidentiality, those sorts of general rules of, good housekeeping and how to create a safe group. And then we can teach each other how to have what I call level 1, 2, and 3 conversations. And the level 1 conversation might be, hey, Mark, you okay? And Mark goes, yeah, I'm fine, mate. Level 1. Level 2 is, well, you don't look fine. I know you pretty well and you seem to be troubled. Is everything okay? Level 2. And Mark goes, well, actually, no, they're not okay. Because now he knows the other guy's serious and really wants to know. there's some layoffs happening at the place I'm working at the moment. I'm a bit concerned about my future and what that means. And then the other guy goes, oh, yeah, I can so dig that. Happened for me last year. Hey, do you want to grab a coffee and I'll share with you how I got through that? Level 3 conversation.
Yeah. It's not hard, but it feels hard for many of the men that I talk to get to that point of vulnerability.
Because they're scared of their own vulnerability because it's something they never explored. And often men's vulnerability has been weaponized.
Yes, most definitely.
So why would they go there?
Yeah.
And so when women say to my wife and I in our couple work, I want my husband to be emotionally available, I say two things. Firstly, he's not by design.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you want someone to protect your home and, going back 2,000 years with community wars,
Yes.
you didn't want a man to be emotionally available. You wanted him to be out there protecting your
right.
family.
Yep.
And a man is not going to be emotionally available to his partner if he doesn't know what's behind his wall.
Yes.
He's not going to let you in because he hasn't been there yet. So it's incumbent, the man's responsibility is to do his own work, and he can only do that in the safe company of other men.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. I must have said that 50 times already, John. I'm thinking about some of the people that I know, some people in my circle, and I don't know that they're going to be well enough supported by the women in their lives to go out and to begin that journey. And so they say, perhaps they choose a little bit, but they stay stuck. And I wonder if you have any tips for those men that are listening that feel stuck.
Get her to read the book.
That's a cracking answer.
That's why it's called For Men and Those Who Love the.
That's a great answer because I don't think I like it. I think
So that's why I wrote it. It's for women as well. It's for women to understand the men in their lives, their brothers, their sons, their husbands, their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, their boss.
yes,
So-
it's very important. I can remember my mother sitting my brother down and teaching him all about girls maturing to become women. And I never had the same education. And I had pretty forward thinking parents, but I didn't get the same kind of education around my brother. In my home, we did a little bit different. There was education for both. But I think that's part of the problem here is women don't necessarily know or understand what's required for a man to be a man. And we don't understand the differences of, well, you voiced it really perfectly again off air. Perhaps we should have recorded all of the off air conversation as well, John. But we were talking about how women traditionally came to be the ones that talk and why the men don't. In fact, I'd love you to share that little bit of information you gave me. It was a great way to put it.
Thanks. If you go back a few thousand years, not even that long, women had to know as the gatherers where stuff was. They had to communicate where the berries or the yams or the, whatever it was that we were picking to feed the to feed the tribe was going to come from. And so you had to be articulate in describing and communicating where things could be found. Men in the hunter role were single file, sign language, didn't speak to each other, singularly focused on the prey, because if they didn't get it right, either they wouldn't eat or they'd get killed.
Yes.
So the stakes were high.
Yeah.
And we talked about Maggie Dent and her book. I can't remember what it's called, something in the Mammoth Hunters.
Yes. I've lost it now too.
Yeah. But she talks, it's a funny, humorous book in that way because she talks about it from that point of view. But when I read it, I went, oh my God, that's so true.
This makes sense. Yeah. I thought it was a great way to put it because I think that I think that women have forgotten how to be women as well. And I don't mean to take a cheap shot, but I think it's important for the men and the women that are listening to understand that we do have roles and we have responsibilities that we can take for ourselves, but also to help and nurture and take care of one another. And sometimes that falls back into women being women and men being men. And I don't think it's acknowledged enough, John.
I would add to that, and I'll just share a little anecdote. I was supporting a man a couple of years ago. He was 28, which is actually part of one of life's transitions for men, which I'll get to before we finish today. And he'd had like a 6-week telephone dating thing going on. And then he said, oh, going out tonight, my first date, blah, 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 really excited. She seems like an amazing person. And so anyway, he went on this date, came back, we caught up, said, how was it? Oh, it was absolutely amazing, fantastic. If you get a second date, yeah, got a second date, fantastic. Goes on the second date, comes back, and I said, how was it? He goes, it was an absolute disaster.
Mm.
So we unpacked it. And what happened was in the first date, she turned up in her feminine self
Ah,
and he turned up in his masculine self. So for your listeners, men and women all have masculine and feminine parts. The masculine part is the doing, the action, get shit done. And the feminine part is the creative part where our ideas and thoughts and music and art and all that sort of stuff can come from in both men and women. But the feminine in a man is different to the feminine in a woman, and the masculine in a man is different to the masculine in a woman. So he's been on this first date. Everything's been hunky-dory. He's been allowed to hold the masculine polarity as she's held the feminine polarity. He goes to the second date, and he sort of goes to open the door for her, chivalrous. And he sort of cops a bit of a look, and he goes, okay. And suddenly as the date started to unfold, and I said to him, she runs her own business. She's 28. He goes, yeah, she's an independent woman. Yeah. So she's also capable of holding the masculine pole. I said,
yes.
did by chance on your second date, you felt like you're in competition? He said, that's exactly how I felt. I said, so you being a smart man, you dropped into your feminine pole to maintain the polarity. And he went, yeah, I did. And I said, sorry, dude, but now you're unattractive.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And he went, no, like he was really upset because he realized. I said, there's nowhere for you to play.
No.
And that's unfortunately what I believe we've been sold a lemon by whoever's, broadcast these messages that we can have everything and we can be everything. Is that in doing that, we've actually done everybody a disservice. I think it's chapter 1, I quote Marianne Williamson here, ran for President of the United States, and she says, we created a generation of hard women and soft men, and it didn't work for anyone.
I agree.
And it's true.
Mm.
And this is not to take away from the incredible progress that's been made under the label of feminism from the point of view of equal opportunity. And if someone asks me, am I a feminist when it's about equal opportunity? I absolutely am. I'm a masculist as well about equal opportunity. But as Warren Farrell says, and I quote him in the book as well, he says that when one holds it as an entitlement, then is neither.
Yes, agree.
Because that just then feeds a gender war. We've seen the results of that on the world stage in the last few years, and identity politics is a disaster.
Yeah, so true. John, I think I've got the terminology wrong, but you were talking about stages. That's the bit that's wrong.
Yes.
Yes. Could you take us through that?
So again, an anecdotal story. I was at an event. My nickname's JB, John Broadbent, and I'll go to my friend runs like an entrepreneur business school, and sometimes one of the guys will come and tap me on the shoulder on the way and go, hey, JB, can I have a chat? And that's code for someone's told me I need to talk to you because I got some shit going down that I don't know how to navigate and I need your help. So I sat with this man over a cup of coffee and he told me what was happening. And I said, okay. And I said, how old are you? And he goes, I'm 28. And within an hour, I'd had 2 other guys, one 29 and one 30. And I went, okay. So I organized with each of them independently to meet me the next day, not knowing it was the same time and the same place. So the first guy shows up thinking that it's one-on-one, and the second guy shows, and the third guy shows. And I tell the story in the book. And they go, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I was like, well, sorry guys, but I've set you up. Can I share with you, each of you, what you shared with me yesterday? And so I shared each man's summary of what they'd shared, and they suddenly looked at each other and went, you too? And the 28 to 30 transition is like Alison Armstrong wrote or did an amazing audio book called The Amazing Development of Men.
Okay.
3.5 hours long. I was in tears for half of it because it's just, incredible. Absolutely incredible. Highly recommend it. 0 to 14, if you think of the knight with a K on his horse and his lance, he had a strapper, a page that used to help him out and polish his armor and all that sort of stuff. So from 0 to 14 or 0 to 7 were effectively boys growing up in the Garden of Eden. Around about 6, 7, 8, something happens. Death of a grandparent, death of a pet. We get sort of evicted from that Garden of Eden and realize that life's not fair. And it sort of shakes us and wakes us up to, that life is not what we thought it was. We get evicted. And then at about 14, we become sexually mature. We get out of the page phase and we now go into the knight phase for about the next 14 years. So 14 to 28, we're storming castles, rescuing damsels, slaying dragons, and pushing our edges, which is why rites of passage happened at 14, because it was preparing them for the knight or the warrior phase. But with a lot more awareness than just allowing it to happen.
Got it.
And there's a great African proverb that says, if we don't initiate the young, they'll burn down the village to feel the heat. And we see that happening all over the world now with gangs and what's happening in Europe and stuff like that. So by not having that, we allow that night energy to now run pretty well unchecked.
Got it.
So a young man then will go into 21, which is, another 7-year milestone, and we used to get the keys to the house, 21st birthday. That's really where it comes from.
Yep.
And then by the time we hit 28, we literally run out of steam.
Yeah.
And all that storming and fighting and castling and climbing and rescuing has sort of gone out of us. And it's very common for a man, 28, 29, 30, to hit what I call a funk.
Yeah.
And it's suddenly like, who am I? I've just done all this. What have I got to look forward to? And it's a real stock take takes place. And it's almost as if there's a recalibration starts to take place. And that's why you'll hear of stories where a guy in his 27, 28, he's been with his high school girlfriend for 9 years, that they haven't had kids yet. She wants kids. He's not ready. She leaves him. 3 years later, she bumps into him in the mall and he's married and pregnant.
Yeah.
Or a dad. And she goes, what happened? Well, didn't wait long enough, because he's got to get through that 28 to 30 transition to then feel that he's now ready to become committed partner and father.
Fascinating. Is there Is there another then? I'm thinking 78, 42.
Yeah, then we go through what Alison Armstrong calls early prince, mid prince, late prince. And you'll see a man in his late prince, he's probably 41, 42, 40-ish, and he just thinks everything's finally settled down. And Alison Armstrong says it's cruel because he gets about 6 months of this magnificent late prince phrase before he's now kicked into the tunnel, as she calls it, which is his midlife passage.
Wow.
We call it a midlife crisis. It doesn't have to be. It's a midlife transition.
Yep.
And there's a whole lot that goes on there that I won't bore you with the detail just now. But fundamentally, it's a shift from the hero part of us, the ego part of us, the necessary ego part of us that gave us our drive. As we go into midlife, any unresolved childhood trauma, big T or little t trauma, as Gabor Mate calls it, will surface because we can't take that into our eldership.
Right.
So what happens is we have to go inside into the tunnel and heal all our wounded parts, or at least the major wounded parts of who we are. So when we come out as the king,
Yep.
we're not the tyrant.
Got it.
And for women, if women aren't doing their queen work while their man is in his king work, he will come out looking for his queen and potentially find the mother of his children. And if that's all he finds, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but if that's all he finds, he's now ready to go and rule the world as the king, because he's now burned off all the bullshit and he knows who he is and what he stands for.
Yeah.
If his queen's not there to stand by him, he will often leave.
John, I've seen this so many times, and when you articulate it like that, it just makes so much sense in a way that I haven't really pulled together before.
You love the book. And kings, by the way, when they come out of their tunnel in their early 50s, are a pain in the ass. Because now they know what they know, they burn away all the bullshit, and now they want to tell everybody how to live their life.
They're the ones on social media that we see all the time.
Exactly. Guilty as charged, Your Honour.
Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a few in my life, John. I'm not without a bunch of kings that are very, very firm in who they are and what they stand for.
So here's the navigation. Kings need to be able to give. Kings need acknowledgement and appreciation. That's all we have to do. Really simple needs. The wise king then does some work around who he is in the world and what he values. And like rite of passage program into eldership that I run in Bali. And then when they go through that, they realize that they now know that they know.
Yep.
They don't have to tell anybody how to live their life. They simply hold a space and a presence and an emanation that people in their orbit will automatically gravitate to them.
I know quite a few of them as well, John. I'm very blessed.
And that's the king elder. And that's the objective for a man to grow into as we evolve. Otherwise, we become the cranky old bastard, might be wealthy with big boys' toys. I know a guy who's an 80 millionaire who comes to Sydney every month and drinks and cocaine and gets absolutely ratted in his late 60s, early 70s and wonders why he's single. and no one wants to be around him because he's a grumpy old shit.
Yeah. Is it possible to avoid doing this work? And I know I'm asking a question in negative, but I wonder, thinking about the fact that he's in his 60s, 70s, and he's still living like that, is it possible to continue to avoid it, or does life keep handing it to you until you do it?
Life keeps smacking it up. I've become a yes man in the sense of not yes to people. I've become a yes man because I used to notice that my philosophy has evolved, Nick, to the point that I now believe that my outer world is a direct mirror of my inner world and my relationship to myself. So when shit shows up in my outer world, I look at it and I go, don't like it, don't want it, but I need it because it's showing up.
Yeah.
If I say no to it, it just disappears and shows up in another way, and sometimes more brutal.
Yes.
So when it shows up and it was a mountain I've got to climb, it's not my first mountain, it's probably my 10th or 11th mountain. I go, not another bloody mountain. And I put one foot in front of the next and one foot in front of the next, and I just climb that mountain that happens to be there because it was put in my way, and that's obviously what I'm meant to do.
Yeah, there's a reason for it.
There's a reason for it. And every time I do that, as hard as it can be, I've always come back richer for the experience.
Mm. John, this has been delightful. I love talking about men, and I really enjoy the way you can pull a story together for that deeper level of understanding. And I just know it's going to have really resonated with our listeners. And that means there's going to be a lot of questions. Where do I find out more about you, John? John, firstly, where does everybody get your book? For anyone that's watching on the shorts, there you go. That's what it looks like. Where can people find your book? And we'll put all of this into the show notes for everybody listening as well.
I believe it'll be heading out to some selected bookstores from the distributors this week from the 1st of October, which is today.
Excellent.
You're publishing in November. By then, it should be available in some major bookstores. It's been available on Amazon, Booktopia, and those sorts of online stores for a couple of weeks now. They can also hit me up on the website. It's manunplugged.com.au.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. John, thank you so very much for your time. I feel like I could sit here with a glass of Shiraz and talk with you all afternoon. That's been absolutely fascinating. You've really dropped some very interesting bombs for me, for some of my clients and some of the people that I have in my life at the moment. I think means I can help them and understand them in a way that I haven't before. Bless you, and thank you very much for that.
Really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, John, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Tradies in Business podcast with Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.